Hi everybody, this is Rose of Sharon and I'm back again with another book review. I just recently read Wild Bill, The True Story of the American Frontier's First Gunfighter by Tom Clavin. And honestly, I really wasn't familiar with Mr. Clavin's work. Back of the dust jacket states he is a New York Times best-selling author. He's also worked as a newspaper and web editor, magazine writer, TV, radio commentator, and reporter for the New York Times. So apparently he's got a lot of clout and he knows what he's talking about. He's received awards from Society of Professional Journalists, Marine Corps, Heritage Foundation, and National Newspaper Association. His books include The Heart of Everything That Is, Dodge City, and Valley Forge. He lives in Sag Harbor, New York. And I have to give it to him. I have to give him kudos. Because I've always been rather fascinated with the Wild West, especially Wild Bill Hickok. And his name wasn't always Wild Bill. It's actually something like with Buffalo Bill or Cody. That was something that was given to him later. Same thing with Calamity Jane. And Calamity Jane is also a very intriguing character as well. But a lot of what is attributed to Bill's life was attributed to legend, lore, and hearsay. And some of it is actually true. The aces and eights is very much true. And how he died at Deadwood. But at one point in time, he actually was a thespian, a failed thespian, and I thought that was rather amusing. But interestingly enough, he fought in the Civil War, and although he was definitely fighting for the Union, he wore rebel colors, which I thought, why would you wear rebel colors if you were fighting for the North? Which is kind of an is definitely an oxymoron, but really quite unique to who Wild Bill really was. And apparently he was rather handsome, and of course photographs depict him as such. And he always had women that were quite fond of him and found him very alluring, and it's not hard to see why. He was a gambler. He was a teamster, and he often lent his services to the revolutionary effort and the Civil War effort, and he certainly had a lot of reputation surrounding him. And the book is absolutely fascinating. Of course, the pictures are also very intriguing. He was an abolitionist as well, which is something I never knew. I learned something entirely different. Yeah. Seems that the Custers were mightily impressed with him. I'm not really surprised at that. Also, it talks about how Calamity Jane was dead on with her marksmanship, because there was a story, and this is actually a true story. They were out in camp or out in the wilderness somewhere, I forget where it was, and there was a coyote, and a lot of the other men that were on the expedition with her tried to kill it, and she took one shot, boom, and right between the eyes, and killed it. I thought, holy crud, she's badass. But yeah, I'm not really shocked at that. And yeah, that's interesting. There's a really mysterious photo. I don't know if this is hearsay or if it was a tall tale that she told, but she claimed here in this photograph to be a scout for George Crook, General George Crook, on his Indian fighting expeditions. I don't know if that is actual or not, but it is true that his grave is in Deadwood. Of course, a lot of scholars dispute where Bill is actually buried, but she and Bill are buried right next to one another for all eternity, and the epilogue actually speaks of that. And I'm going to read what Mr. Clavin actually said. He was killed in a very cowardly manner, which actually Buffalo Bill wrote in his memoir. He was noble, brave, and generous-hearted. He traveled far and wide on the American frontier, meeting many people along the way. It's unbelievable that he was just a pre-adolescent in the pre-Civil War days. They were connected after Hickok's death. That they genuinely liked each other. Hickok and Cody did, although they had a very strong distaste for acting. They savored their adventures they shared within the Wild West and the frontier. Seems like it was Buffalo Bill's idea to have the Buffalo Bills Wild West. It was actually founded in North Platte, Nebraska in 1883. That's still later Victorian era in the U.S. I'm still thinking that was pre-Civil. That's still pre-Civil War days. Geez, I didn't know this either. Buffalo Bill lived to be 71. He died in 1917. But it says here that his that Buffalo Bill, not Buffalo Bill, but Wild Bill Hickok's wife, his real wife, it started to fade. But it says here also as well, it wasn't his true wife that would spend eternity with him, like I just stated. It says here, it would be Calamity Jane who would spend eternity with Wild Bill Hickok. She remained in Deadwood after Hickok's death. Calamity Jane was credited with nursing victims of a smallpox epidemic, that's easy for me to say, in the area in 1878. This is now home for her, even as the town's prospects decline. It actually states that she was one who would tease the men on the expedition and do favors for some. A lot of the men depicted her as having an easy virtue, which can only mean one thing. She was often said to have been a housemaker, and she would just go from place to place, just keeping everything neat and tidy and cooking, and that's how, basically sort of like a glorified waitress or maid in a way. And that's how she made her living, sad to say. And she had much more to offer. She was quite the trailblazer, and she was not one to be messed with. She was definitely a woman who could rough it with the boys. Let's see. She moved on, living in a ranch in Montana and then heading south. In Texas, she met and married Clinton Burke, or Burke, spelled the same way, pronounced the same way, in 1887. She gave birth to a daughter. If I can flip the page, that'd be great. She gave birth to a daughter named Jane, who was raised by foster parents after Calamity Jane returned to her wandering ways. I'm actually not surprised at that, because she was quite the gypsy soul. She was addicted to whiskey and became a severe alcoholism. She still made money doing cooking and laundry. Like I said, she was a glorified maid, but she did that in a brothel. She actually died of pneumonia and inflammation of the bowels. But it says that she's buried right next to Hickok at Mount Moriah Cemetery in Deadwood. One account contends that this was Calamity Jane's dying wish, carrying out the Society of Black Hills Pioneers. But that's quite the love story to surpass time, I do believe. And there's something very poetic about that. That's just probably my sentimentality poking its head out. But I really thought that was something to admire, that even though they were really never married, she still had a great affection and devotion to Bill, even when he was dead and gone. But that's all I have to say about Wild Bill Hickok. If you're like me and you love the Wild West and you're just fascinated by it and you want to learn all you can about how the Wild West actually might have, well, I guess you could say there are a lot of different accounts that are accurate, and then there are others that are complete fabrications, so you never really know. It's just a lot of hearsay, a lot of word of mouth. But I like to think that what we see in Westerns is probably a pretty good indication of what really happened in those days that were lawless and just absolute chaos and discord. And it was he who shoots wins, and he who has the most artillery and quick-wittedness will win the day. It doesn't matter if it's a lawman or if it's an outlaw. If they got a gun, most likely they could shoot it and kill somebody with it. They would probably not be bothered with unless someone's stupid. But there's a lot of truth to that, and I always enjoyed that. And it's just something that makes me proud to be American. Not the whole gun thing, but the whole formation of the country is just, it's in my blood. I just think it's outstanding. It's just a fantastic story of how the country was formed and how we are still in many ways pioneers in our own regard. But that's basically all I have to say. So until next time, live long, prosper. Ciao tutti.